Welcome back everyone to the Frostpunk lore series, where in today's episode we'll discuss the Refugees scenario. This video will be divided up into two sections, the first being all in-game / developer confirmed information, and the second being my own theories as to where the world and story may go in the future. Condemned to die with the rest of the common folk when London was destroyed, the low class rose up and commandeered the dreadnought that was meant to carry the wealthy to safety and sailed north, where they found Generator 014 and claimed it for themselves. Now they must gather all their people in this new city before the lords arrive to rob them of their freedom once again. After stolen ships became stuck in the frozen ocean, a group headed out toward the generator. Most of the people are still on the trail. They have less than 2 weeks of supplies, and the weather is only getting worse every single day. Those around the generator must do everything they can to ensure the survivors arrive safely. So unlike other scenarios, this one is quite different in the sense that we know 250 people are on their way. In most other scenarios, people just happen upon our generator or we find them out in the wastes. The fact that we know a very large group of people are on their way adds an incredibly unique and new element to the Frostpunk gameplay loop. In terms of things happening at the generator, it's pretty tame in the beginning stages. All the builders are basically working on building infrastructure for the coming survivors. So the real juicy lore is out in the wastes. After sending scouts out, we learned some pretty interesting tidbits of lore. Arriving at an old abandoned camp, we find a builder's diary that reads, "Today, we finished building the generator for the lords. Now, at last, we can set out for London to bring our families here to safety." Nearby, we can also find a hanged man hill, where we find the body of a hanged engineer next to a chest of tools and a note that reads, "You lured me here with promises, kept me in the dark, told my wife I died. You're beneath contempt. I hope you enjoy my farewell gift." So this is really interesting. This basically implies that the IEC were able to hire a bunch of builders and engineers for the generator project because they lied to them. Basically saying, hey, build this for us and you'll get a free spot. But in actuality, those destined for the generators were already decided. And based on what we've been told in the intro, it was the rich and powerful that were chosen. While we don't know exactly what this engineer's farewell gift was, I assume it was generator sabotage. Maybe it was Winterhome or maybe it was somewhere else, but most likely he did something to some generator. Continuing our search, we happen upon something known as the Iron Bank, a vault in which the lords planned to preserve as much wealth as they could. There isn't much in the way of gold apart from some ancient jewelry and other works of art, but there are wonders of science, knowledge, instruments, books, newspapers, and letters. So this Iron Bank is basically the last bastion of pre-Frost knowledge. Everything important about preserving Britain's past is kept here. So if/when the world becomes habitable again, the survivors won't have to start from nothing. Continuing on, we find a destroyed fishing village with a broken ice drill. Apparently, this was supposed to be a source of food for the survivors. The large ice drills were used for making holes big enough for survivors to fish under the ice. This makes sense, and I kind of assumed that they would do something like this for food, but it's still cool that it's now confirmed. Eventually, we can find a snowcat, which I assume is some kind of snowmobile or motor sled as they call it, with 2 frozen bodies, some supplies, and a letter from London that reads, "The worst cold is still to come, but they don't say when." This is basically a tease for the big event that occurs during the New Home scenario. In case you don't know what that is, I'll leave it ambiguous, but for all intents and purposes, this basically confirms that this scenario takes place before A New Home, or roughly around the same time. Our scouts can also find the dreadnought we came in on and dismantle it for resources, much like Winterhome did. But speaking of machines, we can find the wreckage of a huge aircraft. This machine had 4 wings arranged in 2 levels and was powered by engines similar to those used in motor sleds, but more powerful and compact. It seems it was used to carry important loads or passengers, but we only find 2 bodies slumped over the controls in the forward cabin. This is interesting and we'll come back to it later, so just keep this in the back of your mind. But this isn't the only new machine we discover out in the wastes, as we find an ocean liner. Apparently this liner brought many rich people here. They could afford to travel in luxury even in these desperate times. On the bridge, our scouts find a letter from Lord Craven to the captain that reads, "If we encounter any of the vessels stolen by the workers, you are authorized to open fire." Nearby, we can even find what they call a naval gun, crudely bolted to the foredeck. Arriving at a radio mast, our scouts search the station to find all of the equipment gone, but a logbook remains, confirming what the survivors feared. London knew about the coming winter well in advance and didn't warn the commoners. Only the rich. Returning back to the generator, we begin to welcome all the refugees. However, after a few groups arrive, some engineers tells us that when they were leaving London in the ships stolen from the Lords, they overheard Lord Craven giving the order to shoot them, basically confirming the validity of that letter found on the ocean liner. Now, if you don't remember, Lord Ebenezer Craven was an individual we mentioned back in my last autumn video. During the chaos in London, as the temperatures began to drop, England's new Prime Minister, Lord Craven, decided to redirect the resources for the generator program elsewhere. I imagine this elsewhere was to his own dreadnought or generator he'll be living at, basically increasing his only chance of survival by hoarding all of the resources. The fact that he ordered his men to shoot to kill the hijackers just goes to show that at the end of the world, nobility, righteousness, and duty all go out the window, and literally everyone will do whatever it takes to survive. Regardless, as our final group of survivors arrive, they are followed by some rather unexpected news. The lookout at the beacon reports to us that a large group of strangers are marching in their direction. It's the Lords they left behind. Immediately, our people begin to panic, fearing the Lords will cast them out or turn them into slaves, and some even claim they must be ready to fight them off. However, as they draw closer, the lookout reports that they are all unarmed, and it appears that they have no intention of attacking. But still, our people are on edge. Finally, they arrive. 100 foodless, tired, and hungry Lords arrive at the generator and beg to be let in. Despite our people truly wanting to grant the Lords the same fate they wished upon them, we let the Lords in. And almost immediately problems begin. One of the Lords refuses to work, claiming that such menial jobs are best left to the common folk, which upsets a lot of our people because a few hours later, that very same Lord was beaten badly and had to be sent to a medical post. The Lords are learning very quickly that the old world is gone. After a few days, more Lords begin to arrive, some of them even coming in sick with an unknown pathogen. Still, we let them in because we're nice, and once we let them in, they overcrowd the medical facilities, pissing off everyone. As we take in the sick Lords, our people begin to spread rumors about them being contagious, and if they don't keep away, they'll all become sick. This angers the Lords, causing one of them to say, "They look at us with such disgust and contempt. Our dignity is not diminished just because we are sick." And after we care for these high and mighty Lords, another unexpected event occurs, as from the wastes, Lord Craven and a few of his men arrive, escorting more than 40 orphaned children. Because we're better than him, we let him in, and he immediately looks visibly frightened because he knows all of his power is lost and he's at the mercy of our people. However, strangely enough, despite our goodwill, Lord Craven leaves just as quickly as he arrived. He leaves us a note saying, "I owe my life to you, and for that I am grateful. Things have clearly changed. You are in charge now, and I am not. That means you will become like me. Mark my words, power corrupts. Great men are almost always bad men. I would know. I was both." And with that, Lord Craven is gone, and with him, the old world. Our people work day in and day out and eventually find some sort of neutral ground and begin to build a world where people are not judged by their social class, but by their actions. While there are multiple endings to this scenario, most of which involve either side killing each other, I really hope that this is the canonical one, because this isn't a time for strife, it's a time for unity. With so much of the world lost and the majority of the population dead, I would hope at least some groups of people are able to put their differences aside and build a better future. Anyway, this is all the important lore I could find on this map, so let's talk about some things. Okay, I may sound crazy, but what if, now hear me out, what if that big plane we found out in the wastes is a hint at what some of the other countries did to survive? We have the French beneath our feet in trains, potentially, so would it really be that big of a stretch to say maybe the Americans are in the air? Let's break some stuff down. The map likely takes place in late 1886 or early 1887. As the big thing that happens during the New Home scenario hasn't occurred yet, and that scenario takes place in 1887. The first powered aircraft capable of sustained and controlled flight was built by the Wright brothers, who successfully flew their aircraft on December 17th, 1903, near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. So we find not only an aircraft, but a massive one at that, 16 years before it was invented in our timeline. We already know the Frostpunk timeline split from our own prior to the Great Freeze on account of the invention of automatons, the invention that I imagine was expedited due to the coming Great Freeze. We don't know when they were invented, but I assume it was rather close to the discovery of the Great Freeze. So while the British were creating automatons, who's to say the Americans didn't expedite an invention of their own? that being this aircraft. So what if, and this is a total shot in the dark, the Americans built this massive Zeppelin of sorts, and from this Zeppelin, they would send out scouting missions aboard these aircrafts to gather resources on the surface and come back up. There's nothing to sustain this theory, but it kind of makes sense. Why else would you invest time in an aircraft? The whole world is ending. What use would an aircraft of that size be if not for reconnaissance and resource gathering? And it would explain why there are bodies aboard, frozen in time, caught in the midst of whatever catastrophe befell them. Maybe they were returning from a mission when disaster struck, leaving them stranded in the frozen wastes. It's totally plausible that other nations would resort to desperate measures to survive. As I said, we've already seen hints of French influence with the underground trains, so it's not far-fetched to think that other major powers, like the United States, would have their own survival strategies. Only time will tell, but it's still really interesting nonetheless. Now, speaking of Lord Craven, I don't think he died. Yes, he did leave us rather abruptly and went off alone into the wastes, but I don't necessarily believe a character that big is just going to be left to die. In this scenario, if we really embrace a "f*** the Lords" mentality, then Lord Craven is unceremoniously hanged or pushed out with the other lords to survive on their own. If we're going with the Kumbaya ending, then he still leaves. So one ending he dies and the others he leaves. I think this is setting up a potential antagonist for Frostpunk 2 or future Frostpunk media. I don't think someone like him would just leave like that. He is more than likely privy to all sorts of secrets. Secrets that the IEC kept from the rest of the population. While Generator 014 was meant for the rich and powerful, I assume it wasn't the only one. There were probably contingencies. Maybe there's another generator elsewhere containing more lords and more of those who are loyal to Craven. If the Unity ending is the canon one and he stayed, then he would likely become a good guy, like the rest of the lords became when everyone unified. The fact that he consciously left means he's still sticking to the old ways. And the fact that he did leave, to me, hints at another generator. Someone like that wouldn't just leave to die in the wastes. He had a plan, and he knew where he was going. And where he's going, well, hopefully we'll learn about that soon.